All right. Uh, Over Christmas, or at Christmas, I received a few books, and they were basically all along the same line. It had to do with science, evolution, that kind of stuff. And sometimes, my personality, I'll go in streaks. I'll get hot on a particular subject for a long time, and then when I kind of peter out on that subject, I'll switch to another subject. It could be prophecy, it could be evolution, it could be theology just in general, it could be the life of Christ, it could be anything. It just, you go in cycles, you go in streaks like that. Well, this particular subject about science and evolution and so forth, it's been a while since I've really got into it as such. I think Steve and those guys were basically in middle school the last time I, really got into this stuff. And I had forgotten, or I hadn't known, that in this last 8 years or so, the deterioration within the church as far as the authority of scriptures, in that how many Christian leaders, seminary professors, Bible school teachers, and so forth, have basically abandoned the authority of Genesis chapter 1 and have tried to accommodate what the world says about the beginning and the creation of life. The church as a whole is basically, well, obviously it's made up of people, and everybody wants to be liked, everybody wants to be included, everybody wants to be taken seriously, everybody wants to be incorporated into the in crowd as such. And the church is no different. I'm talking about the church as a whole. And so what's happened over the last century and a half, is that incrementally and slowly, because the world has been saying one thing, science says we came into creation by this means or that means and so forth. And the Christians are totally the opposite. They say, no, the world and us came into being because of this or that. The preponderance of the world is in one camp, and the Christians are in another camp. Well, that division, some people can't function as a minority. Some people have to be admired or liked or accepted or in the in crowd. It's just the way they're wired. They have to be in that particular mindset. And so when the world says one thing as a whole, and the church says something different on the other side, we have a problem. And a lot of these teachers, professors, pastors, and so forth, in order to not seem stupid, not seem oddball or crackpotish, to seem or not seem that they're running against common sense and accepted science, Christians have begun, or have been in the process of adapting our theology to fit the world's theology, so that we don't stand out as total oddballs and freaks in this world. And so going through these books and seeing the people who have adapted in one form or another the world's position on the creation, it really got me thinking that even just in these last 10, 15 years, the deterioration of the church in this respect is exponential. I'm talking about things like, how did Adam and Eve come into this world? The creation of the world, the length of time that it took to form the world, or more importantly, the universe, and so forth. All these basic things are diametrically different depending on your point of view. If you start out as a Christian, you've got no problem with Adam and Eve being created by God, of God scooping up a pile of dirt and making a sentient, functioning human being. Taking that human being, putting him to sleep, taking a rib and fashioning a woman out of his rib. If you're a Christian, you have no problem with that. God said it. It makes all the sense in the world. I'm going to go with it. If you look at that same thing from the standpoint of the world, well, that's the stupidest thing they ever heard. Scooping up a pile of dirt and making a human being from that pile of dirt doesn't make any sense at all. And then when you factor in the deal, oh, we're going to take a rib and we're going to make another human being from that rib, the world looks at you and laughs. Well, Christians don't want to be laughed at. They don't want to be the butt of jokes. And so we have found ways that we can accommodate our Christianity by going along with the world. To put it bluntly, Christianity has been intimidated by what we call science. The word science is found one time in the Bible, only once. 1 Timothy, chapter 6. One time the word science is mentioned. Oops. I don't need it. That's okay. Thanks. Thank you. It's like the word lawyer. The word lawyer is only found, once or twice in the Bible. And unfortunately, it's with a disparaging type remark. I mean, some things never change. Science is in the same boat here. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 20. Paul's writing to Timothy, and he says, "O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babbling and oppositions of science, falsely so called." So even in Paul's day, the accepted science in the world, or what passed off as science, this would be the Aristotle, this would be Plato, this would be Socrates, this would be Democritus, there'd be all these Greek and Roman guys who supposedly had the world figured out. That was the science of those days, and in those days even, it was in opposition to Christianity. Nothing's changed. The terms have changed. The words have changed. But it's the same philosophy. How you look at things, from what prism and from what eyeglasses that you're looking through. We get impressed because some guy with 12 different letters after his name, BS, MS, DED, PhD, and so forth. He had big long strings of letters after his name, and we get impressed when we see that, because that denotes that this guy has spent X number of years in regular university, gets his BS or BA, then he goes on and gets a master's, another couple of years, and then he goes on and gets a PhD, another 4, 5, 6, 7 years after that, depending on the discipline. And then after he's done, then he's theoretically, he knows everything about whatever that subject was. Well, we don't. I didn't go to school, after high school for another 12 years or so to master a particular subject. So I mentally, socially, psychologically, I defer to this person. He's got the letters after his name to prove that he's smarter than me in this particular area. That makes common sense to a certain point, except, what's a starting point? How do you look at the world? What do you accept? What do you reject? Most of Christianity we've basically given up, or we've compromised to the point on the subject of creation that we're a non-factor anymore. Genesis chapter 1. You realize I hate to refer to Christianity as a religion, because in my mind, the term religion has a really, really negative impression. To me, religion is everything other than Christianity. So I hate to use the two words like I'm going to use them. But Christianity is the only religion, period, that identifies and names the creation. Buddhism doesn't do it. Shintoism doesn't do it. Zoroastrianism doesn't do it. Go right down the line. Every single religion on the planet starts with a universe. And within that universe, now things begin to happen. At one point, the Greeks thought that the world was carried on the back of a big giant turtle swimming in the ocean. The Hindus have a wheel connotation in their mind, a never-ending revolving wheel. Earth's created here, and it goes around and it dissolves and it blows up or so forth, and then the wheel revolves and we start all over again. An endless cycle that goes on for eternity. But it always starts within the confines of a universe. Every religion does, except Christianity. Christianity is the only religion that tells you that the universe itself was made by somebody. Everything else starts with the something. They start with the universe and begin to describe it, explain it, and so forth. Christianity says, no, the universe itself was made by somebody. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. These first 3 verses here, it's the foundation for everything that a Christian believes. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That right there separates Christianity from every other religion on the face of the earth. God created the heaven and the earth. The universe. They say, well, we got a Big Bang thing, everything starts with a little singularity, a little point, and then somehow that little point exploded, and everything that we see, every solar system, every galaxy, every planet, every nebula, everything, the volume of stuff in this universe, put it together, it is literally incalculable. It all started from a point so tiny that you couldn't even see the point. How much faith does it take to believe that cockamamie story? As opposed to, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Well, it depends on how you look at things. What pair of glasses are you using? If you don't believe in God, then that verse, in the beginning God created, is meaningless to you. You're not even going to factor it in. It doesn't even register with you. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard, that an entity, a being, is so powerful that it can create everything, including time and space. And so the scientist, with all those umpteen letters after his name, he's going to look at a verse like this, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and he's going to dismiss it just like that. No. It was spontaneous combustion. It was evolution. It was this. It was that. He's not going to even debate, realistically, this subject with you, because his mind is made up. He went click a long time ago. A Christian looks at this verse and they say, yeah, that makes sense to me. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So it depends on your frame of reference when you're starting out to discuss this stuff. So what we've done in Christianity to accommodate science, falsely so-called, we have come up with a list of cockamamie ideas so that we don't look stupid, that we don't look ignorant, that we can be part of the in crowd, that we can look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, 3, and just kind of wink at it and yeah, we'll go with the flow here. We've got a gap theory. Christians, when you go through the rest of the chapter here in Genesis, it very, very plainly states that God made the earth and the universe 7 days. 6 days, really. That he rested on the seventh. Science looks at that and they're not seriously going to debate you on that. Their mind is made up. God did not make it in 6 days. 14.5 billion years. That's what science says. That's when the Big Bang started, 14.5 billion years ago. That's their mindset. That's their starting point. And you're not going to change their mind. You can debate, you can argue, you can show this, you can show that, you can reference this, you can reference that. In their mind, no. 14.5 billion years, not 6 days. Christian comes to the table, they say, no, God did it in 6 days. Why? Because he said he did it in 6 days. Are you out of your mind? Somebody writes down a little verse and says this, that, and the other thing, and you're going to believe it when we have all this body of evidence. We have all this science. We have geology. We have astronomy. We have just fill in the ology here. We've got it all. And you're going to say that just because somebody in 1500 BC wrote a little line, that we're supposed to take that over all the great science that we see out there? It depends on what your starting point is, where you're going to finish up. So we come up with a gap theory. That's the Schofield Reference Bible, which I think is the greatest study Bible ever made. Schofield Reference Bible says that there was a gap theory. In between, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Aha! Science says there's billions of years in this universal type formulation here. You want billions of years for that? You want millions of years for mankind? Okay, the Christian says, we'll give it to you. And you know where we can put it? We can put it right in between verses 1 and verses 2. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth 14.5 billion years ago. Christians will go along with that because science says so. Verse 2, and the earth was without form and void. Oops, something happened. The earth got all messed up. Oh, I know, the Christian says, there was war in heaven. Satan rebelled. There used to be a race, pre-Adamic race of people on the earth. Lucifer was their king. The earth used to belong to Lucifer. He rebelled, and God wiped out the pre-Adamic race. He wiped out the earth as we knew it then, and now he's going to redo it. Christian says, if you want your 14.5 billion years, we'll go along with that. We'll stick it in between verse 1 and verse 2. That's called the gap theory. we come up with the day and the age theory. Because all through the first chapter in here, God keeps saying, and the evening and the morning were the first day. The evening and the morning was the second day. The evening and the morning was the third day, and so forth. All through the 7 days. Somebody comes along and says, yeah, but evolution says that it took millions and millions and millions of years. The Earth itself wasn't formed, or our star, rather. The Earth star wasn't formed until 4.5 billion years ago. The universe itself, 14.5 billion. Our star, little sun that goes across in our sky, that was 4.5 billion years ago. And the Earth came after that. And so the Christian says, well, gee whiz, science says so. Well, I guess that might be right. Well, the Bible says it was 6 days. Science says, no, it's 4.5 billion years. Gee, what do we do? The Christian says, oh, I know. We're going to make the day, that evening and the morning. That's the way God describes it. And the evening and the morning was the first day. The evening and the morning was the second day. It's a 24-hour designated period. Science says, no, that wasn't a 24-hour period. It was an age. Day 1 was an age, and that age may have been 40 million years. And the second day, another 40 million years. And so the dumb Christian who doesn't want to be left out or look stupid or have to defend something that he has no clue what he's talking about says, gee whiz, that sounds pretty good to me. And so we have the day age theory. That, yeah, when God says in the evening and the morning was the first day, no, that was really representative of a 40 million year period of time. We have the framework hypothesis, and that is, yeah, God did these things. He did them in the order of which he says he did them, but they're just representative. It's not really how it happened in real life. God's trying to convey a thing to us. He has to use words to convey that thought to us. So he picked these particular words about day, evening and the morning, time, and so forth. And they're just representative. That's all they are. He's not really trying to be specific. He's not trying to be literal. He's just trying to convey an overall feeling here. We have theistic evolution. A lot of Christians go along with this cockamamie thing. Yeah, God created Adam and Eve. Yeah, God created the sun, the moon, the stars. Yes, God did all this stuff. But the mechanism, the mechanics of which he used was evolution. He didn't really make Adam from a pile of dirt, breathe into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. He didn't do that on a live time basis. 5 minutes of scooping up the dirt, throwing some spit in there to keep it together or whatnot. And then breathe into it. And that was, let's say an hour it took him to do that. No. It took him millions and millions of years because he used evolution. We start off with a one-celled amoeba. And that one-celled amoeba was able to generate himself. Now he's 2 cells. Now he's 4 cells. Now he's 8 cells. Now he's 16 cells. Now he's 32. And so on and so forth until he gets big enough. Now he's something. Took millions and millions and millions and millions of years. And we go through the little evolutionary picture thing that we've seen since the time we were in kindergarten. We start out with a little amoeba, and we finally, after millions of years, we get up to the little mollusks and the little mammals and the little reptiles and so forth. And finally, up pops a chimpanzee, a monkey. And we can see the little graph. You start off with a little monkey. Then the monkey begins a little bigger because he's standing a little more erect. And then the third picture we see, now he's lost the great big protruding jaw and the receding forehead thing and the big old apey arms. Now he begins to look more like us. In the fourth picture, He's just about like us, but he's a Neanderthal at that point. So he still doesn't look exactly like us. And then the last picture is some erect guy just standing, walking around, looking like he's a great guy. And that's the way science looks at the creation of man. Millions of years. Yes, God created man, but he used evolution to do it. So the Christian says, gee whiz, I don't want to look dumb. I'll go along with that. Then I already alluded to the Big Bang. Who initiated the Big Bang? Let's say, just for a second, let's say for argument's sake, that there's nothing except a little singularity, a little point, smaller than an atom. And one day, that little point exploded in a big bang, and every single thing that we see in this universe came from that one little point. Let's say that that happened. Where did the point come from? Science has no clue on that one. What initiated the spontaneous explosion or bang that initiated the whole thing? They don't have a clue about that. Because there's two sides of science. There's observational science and there's historical science. Observational science is real science. You have a hypothesis, you come up with a theory, you test the theory, you fine-tune your hypothesis, you retest it again, and finally, after a while, you got it figured out. Speed of light, we know. It's 186,000 miles a second. We've got instruments that can measure it. We've got all kinds of ways to determine that. That is referred to as observational science. Gravity. I hold up a piece of paper, I let it go, it's going to fall to the ground. Well, I might sit there and have a conjecture. Why does it fall to the ground? How come it falls to the ground? And I go through all these, mind machinations to figure it out. Finally, it dawns on me. Well, the thing underneath me is so big, called the Earth, and it generates so much electromagnetism and so much gravity and so forth that pulls everything in towards the core and blah, blah, blah. We can go on and on about this thing. When Isaac Newton tried to explain the concept of gravity, he had to come up with a mechanism whereby he could mathematically prove this thing. So when he's trying to explain the theory of gravity, he has to come up with a little branch of science called calculus. That's where calculus comes from. Newton is trying to explain the concepts of gravity. So he comes up with calculus in order to do it. Observational science, we've got no problem with that. Fire burn. You light a match, you hold your hand over the match, it's going to burn. Period. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. Water is wet. These are things that we can feel, touch, test, everything else. It's observational science. But there's another branch of science, which is referred to as historical science. What happened at the moment of the so-called Big Bang? Who was there to take notes? Because they go so far as to say that 12 milliseconds after the initial Big Bang, the temperature of the universe was so many trillions of degrees Celsius. Who took notes to figure that one out? Who was there to see it? You see where we're going on this little thing? There's nobody there that's taking notes. There's nobody there that can make an experiment. There's nobody there that can verify the experiment. So historical science, it's whatever you want to believe. Whatever your mindset is, you can fill in the blank. So is it any wonder where the average, I'm saying the average, there are a lot of good Christian scientists out there, but the average scientist, when it comes to creation, the odds are that that scientist does not believe in God. The odds are that scientist does not believe in the Bible. The odds are that scientist does not believe in the creation account of Genesis. So when we're not talking observational science now, when he goes into the historical aspect of science to come up with the Big Bang or the gap or any of these other theistic evolution or framework, hypothesis and so forth, now it's all guesswork, and the guesswork is determined by your starting point. If I don't believe in God, I'm not going to believe in the story of Adam and Eve. If I don't believe in God, I'm not going to believe in that 24-hour cockamamie story that's listed in Genesis chapter 1. If I don't believe in God, I'm not going to believe that God created the universe. So that's my starting point. You can argue with me all day long. You're not going to change my mind. Same thing with Christianity. I happen to believe in God, so I'm not believing in the Big Bang. I happen to believe in the Genesis account. So I believe they were literal 24-hour days, and there were 6 of them. I do believe, and this is the mind blower, I do believe that he did not make the sun, moon, and the stars until day 4. 4. Let that float around in the scientist's mind for a bit. If they had a problem with the 14.5 billion years that we don't believe, or the 4.5 billion years for the sun, let them float that one around. Hey, we believe that he didn't even make the sun, moon, and stars until day 4. So you see the difference? And Christianity, as a whole, has buckled under the pressure. So we have found all these different ways to keep our Christianity, to keep the Bible, to keep Genesis, to keep the way that we believe, and yet to accommodate the world into their 14.5 billion year Big Bang cockamamie theory. Romans chapter 1. We'll end up with Romans here. Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, beginning at verse 18. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. We're talking about truth here. Hold the truth in unrighteousness. So in other words, there is a truth out there. Hold the truth. But somebody disagrees with that truth. Somebody doesn't believe that truth. So they hold that truth in unrighteousness. They say it's a sin, or it's not right, or it's wrong. So this is the premise of which we're starting here in this thing. Verse 19. Because that which may be known of God. We're talking about maybe creation here. We're talking about origins here. We're talking about Genesis here. We're talking about the creation of stuff here. That which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. So now we're back to starting points again. We're back to point of view. These people know, or at least at some point in their lives, they knew the truth of God. They rejected the truth of God. They held it in unrighteousness. But God had showed it to them. There's a verse in Psalms that says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament showeth his handiwork. Every little kid on the planet who's ever laid down in a backyard at night and looked up at the stars, that thought hits their mind. Where did the stars come from? Who made the stars? Because even as a little kid, we understand the concept of making stuff. They see mom make dinner. They see dad make this or make that. They make things. I made a slingshot one day. I built a race car one day. I built a tree house one day. We understand the concept of making things, even at a really teeny age. We get it. So the little kid looks up at the stars and says, well, who made the stars? And the average little kid, before science gets a hold of them, before their peers get a hold of them, before the adults screw them up, the average little kid, left to its own devices with no other external influences, will believe. Okay, God made them. That makes sense to him. Every little kid has no problem with that. It's only when we get in school and the professors get a hold of us that we begin to lose our faith. So these people knew the truth. God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things, verse 20, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Whoa. The invisible things are seen? What kind of sense does that make? I have a hand. You can see me manipulate the fingers. Well, common sense, if you think about it long enough, tells you that there might be some bones in here, there might be some joints in here, there might be some ligaments in here, that when my brain says activate the hand and the ligaments begin to pull and the joints begin to react, you don't see the bone, you don't see the ligament, you don't see the blood coming through here, but you can see by the result that there has to be something going on in here that you can't see. And we break it down even further. Well, what is the ligament made of? What is the bone made of? What's the blood made of? And we go down further and further and further and further and further till we get to the atomic stage, and every little thing in the universe is all made up of the same identical building blocks. It's just how the combinations are put together that make it different. Water is different than fire. The components are the same when you get down to the atomic level. It's the combination. Hydrogen, oxygen, totally separate, totally different. But you take two little hydrogens and you mix it with one little oxygen. Wow, now we've got water. We've got a third different thing here. But we can't see the elements. We can't see the atoms within this stuff. All we can see is what we can see. So God says, the invisible things. I can't see atoms. They're invisible. The invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. How? Being understood by the things that are made. I have a piece of paper here. It's atoms, when you get down to it. Microphone, metal. Atoms, when you get down to it. I can only tell the difference because paper is not metal. But the building blocks are all the same. So the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Remember, we're talking about truth here. Back in verse 18 it says, hold the truth in unrighteousness. That's the subject matter, truth. So he says, they are without excuse because God has showed it unto them. They just refuse to accept it. Refuse to go along with it. So now the fight is on. Verse 21, because that when they knew God, maybe just as a little kid, before somebody told them, no, there is no God. No, God didn't do it that way. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. You can see this played out in every generation that's ever lived on the face of this planet. Little kid might start out believing in the concept of God, and he may call him by a different name. He may have a different impression of what he is, but the concept of God is basically universal. Until we get into school. And when we get into school, science begins to rear its ugly head. And the professors keep drumming it and drumming it and drumming it and drumming it. Until by the time you get out of high school, if you've got any faith left, when you hit college, forget it. Because those professors are on steroids when it comes to this thing. They will belittle you. They will make you feel stupid. They will make you feel bad if you retain any semblance of faith or acceptance of Christian principles. And so by the time the kid gets out of university or college, hey, who believes in that fairy tale type stuff? Who believes in those stories? Who believes in that Sunday school junk? Not me. I'm educated. I'm sophisticated. I'm hip. And in verse 22, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. I'll finish this up. We'll have another message on this next time. But for right now, just let it float around. Christianity has dropped the ball. We don't defend the faith the way we should. We have succumbed to peer pressure. We've invented or accepted the world's theories to accommodate their profession of what reality is supposed to be like, and we've abandoned our Christian principles. We've dropped the ball. Big shock when Jesus said, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. Big shock. Heavenly Father, these are not easy messages to do. I don't have any problem with the folks sitting here in front of me. And I realize that for them, what I had said today is not that big of a deal. It's not that earth-shattering. They've heard it in some form or another before. But for those who either online or CD or tape or whatever it happens to be that gets this stuff, this might be an earth-shattering concept. And I realize that it's not accepted even in Christian circles that much anymore. We've completely abandoned, for the most part, any defense of the faith. And we've just gone along to get along. So, Father, my prayer today is that you would take these words, take these verses, take these concepts, drill them into the hearts of those who used to know better, Drill them into the hearts of those who used to believe in God as such. Drill these into the hearts of Christians who have abandoned Genesis chapter 1 to accommodate the world's idea of how things transpired and worked out. God, help us as Christians to get back to our basics, back to our beginnings, back to the origins of this book, and to defend them, to stand up for them, to know them, and to not be afraid to say them. God, give us courage in this world of which we are totally in the minority in on this respect. Give us the courage to stand up for what is right in Jesus' name.